All right. So again, good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is a special presentation with Brain Balance, and we also have our guest presenter, Jennifer Fraser, PhD, on how to elevate your brain health through kindness. So a little bit about Brain Balance. Why are we here today? Why did we invite Jennifer to be here? Well, we're a really unique company where we help kids, teens, and adults improve their brain health and brain functioning. And we tend to see folks who are looking to enrich their cognitive abilities from focus to supporting their mental health, such as anxiety or anger management, and so much more in between. So we have three centers here in San Diego. If you are local, in San Diego is Carmel Mountain Ranch, Chula Vista, and Encinitas. And if you're virtual, we do support people virtually and actually globally as well through our different modalities of our program. Our program is considered research-based and evidence-based, specifically around ADHD. We do tend to see a lot of folks with ADHD or ADHD symptoms. You can see a lot of that research on our website, brainbalancesandiego.com, under research or brainbalance.com/research. But generally speaking, it just shows how our program, which has been in effect for about 20 years now, really does improve overall functioning and brain health from how we focus, like I said, and cognitive skills to our mental well-being. And what makes us different is that we really look at the whole person and supporting the foundation and the root cause of what's happening. From understanding you need to be developmentally appropriate and have all these neural networks that are syncing together and working together. There's a saying that this industry likes to comment on, a brain that is wired together fires together. And I believe Jennifer will be talking a little bit about that as well in her presentation. So we really understand that there is this whole foundation that needs to happen, whether you're a child or you're, in the middle of your career or you're retired and looking to support your well-being, you still need this whole foundation to function at your very best. So if you're interested in learning more about brain balance, please check out our website, brainbalancesandiego.com. You can always call or text us or email, whatever is easiest. And of course, social media at Brain Balance San Diego. We're on all the networks. And again, for those that just joined us, we will be sending a recording of this presentation. It will be on our YouTube, so there's a lot of resources there as well. And in general, we do have free presentations and events happening every single month. So best ways to look on our website, or you can go to bit.ly/BBSD events. All right. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Miss Jennifer. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Jennifer, feel free to share your screen as well. Let me see how I can stop sharing my screen. Okay, there you go. So one of the main questions I wanted to start off with, and Jennifer will be introducing herself, and who she's all about. But I was introduced to her through a couple of the folks that are participants right now. Because last month was World Kindness Month, and we talk so much about social emotional learning here at Brain Balance. Again, whether you're a child or an adult, we can improve how we interact with the world around us and our community. And we already knew the thoughts we have and what we put out into the community, into our own families and friends, affects our brain health and affects how we function. And so it was an ambitious, I would say, idea that has come to fruition, and I'm excited. And so, Jennifer, please let everybody know, who is this presentation for? Why are we doing this, and why is this so important to you?
It is a great question. So, really, in the large scale mission that I'm on, I want people to make an exit. I want them to exit out of a framework or a paradigm that I believe is outdated and that does not serve us anymore. And we're getting many different signals in our world, especially among our children and youth, that tell us that it's time to leave. And that outdated paradigm is what I call the bullying and abuse paradigm. And the reason why I talk about it as a framework and kind of a thought framework is that even though it's uncomfortable to talk about and people don't like to, the bottom line is we've had our brains fired up and wired in to believe on many different levels that bullying is actually necessary. It's a necessary evil for greatness. And we use lots of different words when adults are applying this bullying model, this abuse model to children. We say it's tough love.
I was just going to say that.
We need to learn consequences, we say, as a child sobs because they refuse to bring their jacket and now they're cold. These sorts of behaviors that are very normalized in our culture. And when adults do them, we don't use the word bullying. We use the word discipline. We use the word motivation. We use lots of words that make it sound as if the behaviors that we're doing that we come by honestly. It's not that we intentionally, thoughtfully, informed by brain science, chose these behaviors that bottom line are incredibly unkind with children and youth who don't know, they don't have the experience or knowledge or power to defend themselves or to ask for a different approach or any of these things. And so my big mission is we need to exit that paradigm. And I find it super exciting because once we exit that way of thinking and once we step away and start to look at it in a more critical sense of like, wait a second, why are we doing this? Who told us that this was an effective method for teaching or coaching or any of these kinds of things? Because the place that we walk into is what I call the neuro paradigm. And the neuro paradigm, it's brain informed, as you can hear from the title. It's a place where we measure the way we're conducting ourselves, not by, we've always done it this way, not by, oh, this is the status quo and I'm going to guard it with my life because this is what I was taught and I believe that I'm a successful and powerful person.
Mhm.
No, the measure we use is brain science. So we say to ourselves, is kindness a good way to conduct ourselves? Well, the brain science says, the health science says, the educational science says, brain balance proves it. It is absolutely good for you. It's incredibly good for you. Whereas we can look at lots of research, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at some of the research on how unkindness, bullying, abuse, these kinds of wired in socially acceptable behaviors are actually really negative for the brain. So my target audience is anyone who deeply believes that the unkindness, the bullying route is probably effective. It's how you meet the bottom line we hear about at work. And sports coaches say they've got to break these athletes down and then build them back up. It's like, no, you don't. So this is the shift.
I love it. Okay, so parents, educators, teachers, coaches, I'm hearing, maybe even bosses and managers in the community, with their teams, yes?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
All right, all
So
right.
what I want everyone to do today, bear with me. I'd love you to suspend the ethical framework that most of us operate in when people are unkind. If someone's unkind, if someone's bullying, especially, and even children, if they show bullying behaviors, it's a big ethical crisis. It's moral, and we punish them. We say your behavior is absolutely wrong and unacceptable, and you will be suspended. You will be expelled. You cannot be part of this community because of the way you're behaving. I want you to say to yourself, okay, maybe that's a framework we've all been trained in, and that's okay, and it has its place. I'm not trying to deny it has its place, and I'm certainly not trying to take accountability away from the person that is unkind. On the flip side, though, I'd like you to think brain science framework for today. Let's look at this behavior from the point of view of the brain, from brain science, and ask ourselves, could we be more effective in changing the behavior, which is the work that you do, Amanda? We all heard that child saying, I used to get very, very angry.
Yeah.
And I learned methods and strategies to manage and learn about my anger, where it's coming from. So that was a perfect example of, he wasn't saying, I'm a bad person. My family and brain balance tells me that I don't belong. I can't be part of the group. I'm not allowed to attend. I have to stay home. I have to have time outs. I have to sit in the principal's office. I'm bad. He didn't say any of those things. He said, I learned how to work within myself, mind, brain, body, to manage my anger. And that's my model. So unkind impulses was what Amanda and I thought, okay, let's just out of the gate, let's talk about that. Where do they come from? Why are people so unkind? So we've already just briefly said it can get wired into you. So you can be wired surprisingly easily. You can be wired to do terrible, terrible things. Any quick glance at history will tell you that it doesn't take long if you have an authoritarian figure telling you that you must behave in a certain way and then repeating the directives. And then if you think large scale, like politically, they might be threatening you, threatening your family, you will fall into line. Absolutely. And plus, it's wired into you in our school system. Our school system teaches you at a very early age and then repeats almost daily that you must respect the adult. You must respect the teacher, respect the coach, respect the administrators, and you're not to question them, and you're to obey. And so when you are told to obey directives that are unhealthy, think dictatorships today. Like if you went to North Korea and took a look at their educational program, they do things like separate very young children, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, from their parents. They only see their parents at limited times. Their educational models are constructed on unkindness. They are about how the West is an enemy, and they will use a math problem or a short story or any kind of lesson to reinforce the messaging that the West is essentially evil. They're an enemy, and they are dangerous. And I mean, that gets wired into their brains. This is the root of what we call sociopathy. When someone becomes a sociopath, it's trained into them, wired into their brains. So that's one. Another way in which people manifest unkind impulses, and we're going to talk more about it, and the way the presentation is structured is kind of all of the hard research and hard information on unkindness or bullying and abuse, and then we will cross into the whole realm of what most people know better now, which is the kindness side of things and all the different things we can do, which anyone familiar with brain balance already knows. There's many positive interventions we can do. We're not stuck with this outdated paradigm. We can exit it and we can create a new one. And that's where I work. So people who bully, if we can step outside the ethical model, they come by it honestly. There is a genetic component, and everything in neuroscience, as you all know, is very complex. But basically, they also know that nurture is a huge part of destructive impulses and behaviors and hurtful behaviors. When people, one of the things that I say all the time is hurt brains hurt. And it's just an extension or a condensation of the expression that hurt people. Yes, they do. And it's really a brain function. It's a dysregulated brain in action. And it's not an ethical decision. They're not setting out to purposefully harm. What they're trying to do is manage their own very dysregulated brain. And we, as we all know, we do lots of destructive things as we try to manage a dysregulated brain. So most people come at this type of behavior from neglect and from abuse. They're not coming from loving families. They're not coming from supportive networks. They're not coming from educational opportunities. They're coming from abuse and neglect. And that's well documented in the research. So hurt brains hurt. You know, this is an obvious example of cyberbullying. And what most people don't know in our society, we're very trained to believe that bullying among our child populations and youth populations comes from a power imbalance. And I think it's not healthy messaging personally. I think that what we should be training children to understand is that when they see someone bullying, whether they're on the receiving end of it or they are the bystander or the person that intervenes, when they see that type of behavior, really what they're seeing is what you could refer to, and we have lots of issues around this, but the bottom line is you're seeing mental illness. You're seeing a dysregulated brain. You're seeing someone issue a major cry for help. If you have a child or an adult in the workplace who goes into work or goes into school, and instead of looking to read books, meet their friends, try out a sport, find their favorite teacher, do all kinds of things that are engaging and curious, you've got that person looking for a target to hurt them, to humiliate them, to expose them as weak. You have a very dysregulated brain, and it should be sort of a big alarm to the whole system that the child needs help, the family needs help, there needs to be an intervention. But it's not a bad child you're dealing with. It's not a child who is breaking rules and needs to be punished. That's outdated. You're looking at a mentally ill brain. There's no power there. There's a massive deficit in power, or they wouldn't need another person to return it to them. And that's really like, if we started to train in that model, imagine how quickly the bullying child would be the one seen as the one with the issue and the problem, and they need counseling. They need everybody to help them. They don't have any power. And the kids that witness it and are on the receiving end of it can go and get that help for them. Go and tell a teacher, because that bullying child is issuing a cry for help. And it's a health issue. It's a very concerning issue. And the other thing too is, this dysregulated brain that's acting out, we don't train kids to understand, or adults for that matter in the workplace, that every single time they bully someone else, every single time they lash out, whether it's a defensive sort of abrasive act, a panicked brain, or if it's a brain that has been wired by abuse and neglect, so it's a very dysregulated brain, as we will talk about, that person hurts their brain, their own brain. Every single time they repeat these acts, going back to what Amanda was talking about, this is a very well established in neuroplasticity research. Every single time they fire up the neural network for hurting someone, they are wiring it into their brain. And I don't know if you've ever looked at job applications these days, what they're looking for, the type of employee, especially with mounting technology and so on. They're not looking for people that are adept at bullying and abusing other people. They're looking for people that have high levels of empathy. The empathy component of the human brain cannot be replicated by technology. It can replicate cognitive behaviors. AI replicates cognitive, but it can't replicate affective empathy. It has no feelings. It's a machine. And so our absolute defining gift as human beings is our affective empathy, our ability to feel someone else's pain. And that's at the root of kindness and compassion. And that's needed in the workplace more and more. And so we want our kids and our young people and our young adults and our adults in the workplace to be engaged in training that part of the brain, protecting it, making it healthy, making it robust and resilient. We don't want them to erode it. And that's what you do when you bully someone else. So people always ask me, when you say how the brain is actually getting hurt by bullying and unkind behaviors, what's happening to it? And so I'm going to give you three small things. Well, these aren't small things, they're huge, but I'm just going to give you three out of the many things that happen to the brain when it's under attack. The brain doesn't know the difference between a verbal insult and a predator. So it doesn't know that it isn't face to face with a lion. When the body reacts, and the brain reacts, which is automatic, it happens right away. You can't control it. It's unconscious. So instantly you go into fight, flight, and freeze. And fawn is another one, but it's a bit complicated for now. But you go into this sympathetic nervous system response without planning to. It just happens. And so we as adults know, you can get that terrible feeling. You can feel your heart go up. You can feel sweaty. You can feel your blood pressure rising. You can feel anxiety. You can find it suddenly very hard to concentrate when you're stressed out, when you can't find your car keys, when you have an outstanding bill and you don't have the funds to pay it, when you have to do public speaking, when you have to move, when you're going through a divorce. There's a million different ways in which our sympathetic nervous system in the 21st century is getting activated over and over and over again. What it does is it shoots adrenaline and cortisol into the brain and body. Cortisol, of course, is a very healthy stress hormone. It's what keeps us alive. If we didn't have it, we wouldn't instantly go into fight, flight, freeze, which are all of if you think animals, those are all the ways in which we stay alive. If you're a saber-toothed tiger, you're going to fight. If you are a gazelle, you're going to flight. You're going to run away from the danger. If you are a rabbit, you're going to freeze. You're going to go so still that no one can see you. And we mammals, humans, do the same exact behaviors, and our bodies respond in extremely similar ways. Now, if the cortisol is pumping, the adrenaline is pumping, and we can't control it, we can't manage it, and we don't have the strategies and techniques, and our society doesn't tell us that we're getting this activated response, and especially it gets activated from unkindness and bullying, then it erodes brain architecture. It does physical damage to brains. This physical damage, these neurological damages done to the brain, can be seen on a brain scan. So that is the absolute core of my work in my book, The Bullied Brain. It's all about how people need to know this. You need to know that when you bully somebody, you humiliate them, you're sharp with them, you ignore them, you ghost them, you act like they don't matter, you do social relational things like you don't invite them to a meeting where they should be because they threaten you or whatever your issue is. You're harming someone else's brain at the same time as you're harming your own brain. So this is the medical model. This is the health crisis model. This is a public health issue. It's huge. And we're seeing it in our youth populations, most of all. Now, just a quick aside, I'm not doing adolescent brain today. It is a whole powerful, important field, and I'm sure many of you know it. But just a quick aside on that is the most vulnerable brain to unkindness is the adolescent brain. 10 to 25, they are undergoing very intensive brain changes and development, and they are the most susceptible to humiliation, things that affect their social status among peers, anything that embarrasses them or makes them look silly or not smart or not strong. That is like poison for their brains. Their brain is being wired to get out and establish themselves socially. They care about social status and prestige and opportunity. And when those things are threatened by the powerful adults in their world in particular, it is toxic. So we have to be way more caring, especially of our adolescents. We tend to think of little ones as needing more protection. Our adolescents, even though some of them look like adults, very early, and certainly by the time they're in their 20s, they are vulnerable. They need our best protection and our most sensitive ways of proceeding so that we don't jeopardize their social standing in particular. So here's three parts of the brain, for example, that get targeted by this influx of cortisol. The hippocampus can be shriveled, like literally on a brain scan. It should be plush and look healthy and so on. But when it is being repeatedly stressed by bullying and unkind acts, that kind of environment, it will be shriveled. And it's the seat of learning. It's the seat of memory. It's what we tag our memories for long-term, short-term, and emotionally. It's critical to education and to learning in the workplace and learning new things. And so we don't want our hippocampus to be horribly affected by this kind of stressful environment that we create far too often. The corpus callosum is the bundle of fibers between the left and right hemisphere of the brain. And what you see in someone who's repeatedly exposed to verbal abuse or yelling in the face, berating, threatening, these kinds of things, ignoring, ostracizing, those brains will have demyelinated corpus callosum. Myelin, for people that don't know the term, myelin is the fatty insulator that grows on axons in the brain, and it's what allows super fast, super powerful, effective electrical communication. So you can well imagine the communication between left and right hemispheres is critical, and you want it to be fast and efficient. But if it's demyelinated, it's clunky. It's not working well. It can't be effective. And so again, just look at how bullying and abuse, unkindness, it creates an atmosphere that is really unhealthy for brains. And then a final one that is again well documented in the research is the amygdala can get deeply affected. It can become hypervigilant. It does many things, but in general, we can call it the threat system of the brain, that the detector. It scans for danger all the time. And if the amygdala has been repeatedly exposed to violence and danger and verbal abuse and these things, it will enlarge in some cases even, because it's taking all the resources from the brain. It's taking all the energy and the nutrients and resources because it thinks it's in so much danger. That brain is not concentrating. That brain is so worried. It keeps predicting disaster. And so it's not thinking and connecting and doing all the creativity and all these things that brains should be doing. And then, as we've already talked about, the nervous system is in fight, flight, freeze. That's extremely unhealthy. That brain can't learn or remember or heal. So it's very important. Just a quick addition to this, we tend to think of in the physical realm, the more activity, the more active the abuse, the more harm it does. In the psychological realm, the brain realm, neurology world, and the nervous system, so the physiological world, in lots of passive action, or well, that's a bit of a contradiction, passivity, let's just say, it can be just, if not more harmful. The brain depends on connection. So every time you disconnect, you suggest that someone doesn't belong or they might not be worthy, and you did it through a joke, or you did it through embarrassing them in a meeting, or it's just misogyny, let's say, is kind of normal in your workplace, and it's just the way it's always been, and these kinds of things that people say all the time. Oh, that's just so and so. Well, even microaggressions, they are very well aware that they do harm to the brain, harm to the nervous system, and they are infectious. Just like all forms of bullying and abuse are infectious, so are microaggressions, and they can be used to cover up even more serious abuse that's happening. If it's your culture, you don't notice when things are getting spiraling more and more out of control. People use the example all the time of the frog in the pot where the water is just warmed up a little bit, so the frog doesn't jump out, doesn't notice. Next thing you know, it can't swim, it can't survive. That's what happens with microaggressions in schools or workplaces or sports or whatever. So the absolute worst thing that can happen to these brains of people that are enabled and it's covered up and they're supported in the bullying or unkind acts or microaggressions that they do, and this happens a lot in the workplace. This is what my next book is all about. This, it's called The Gaslit Brain, and it's looking at the workplace and how we've allowed these types of behaviors to be so normalized, and it's incredibly unhealthy. So what happens to the empathy system we talked about before? It makes you sought after in the workplace. It's absolutely critical to a happy, healthy family and friend group, and everything is, it hinges on your affective empathy, the core part of yourself that enables you to be kind. It enables you to be compassionate because you feel other people's pain and you want to take it away. That is the absolute core of it. And I mean, empathy in the brain, like everything in the brain, is very complex. The neuroscientists believe that there's at least 10 regions of the brain that are fully interconnected when it comes to affective empathy. And so what happens to your empathy when you are perpetually unkind, you are perpetually bullying, you become abusive? And it is like a gateway drug where you need more and more stimulants, more and more cruel acts in order to get the hit that you need for it. And what it does is erode the affective empathy in your brain. Now, this is very, very serious. And all children should be taught this, and youth and all people in the workplace. What happens is the brain becomes what the psychologists call the dark triad. And if you haven't heard that expression, the dark triad is a shorthand for narcissists, Machiavellians, and psychopaths. And they have diverse brains. They're different, but they're also very similar. And these people, they don't feel anyone's pain. They have empathy erosion. And the old-fashioned word for that, if we were back in our ethical model our framework that we're much more accustomed to, we would call those people evil. They're evil. They will hurt an animal. They will hurt a person. They don't see them or feel them. They see them as objects. They're objectified. They're like pawns on a chessboard. They're just there to be sacrificed. They're there to, they groom higher ups. They groom powerful people. They groom influential people, but they just see them as objects. They don't care about them. They just use their kindness to bring them into their circle because they're so useful when abuse reports come in. So the psychopath gets an abuse report coming in saying he or she did these terrible things. They're not believed. The victim is not believed because all of these other people have been groomed to believe that the psychopathic individual or the narcissist is actually charming and lovely and kind and a family man and goes to church. It's a very carefully constructed identity. It's developed this way in order to enable harm to others. And it's a horrible thing, but it's extremely well established in research. So we have to find the courage to talk about it. So when you see a child who's using these bullying behaviors, it's a health crisis. It needs to be stopped immediately. Just like if you saw them having trouble with their heart or asthma where they couldn't breathe or their leg was broken, you would instantly get professional help. You'd get it rushed right in. You'd call 911. It's an emergency. This is how we should treat bullying. Bullying is an emergency. You are watching a child or an adult erode their own empathy, and they need an intervention. And the exciting news is the brain is wired to repair and recover. So the subtitle of my book, The Bullied Brain, which sounds really horrible, like all the horrible things I'm telling you now, the subtitle is Heal Your Scars and Restore Your Health. Our brains are wired to repair and recover. So there is no reason, just like if it was heart or lungs or your gastrointestinal system or your broken leg, we can get it better. We can get eroded empathy better. So we should be doing it rather than letting it constantly happen. So if the brain doesn't feel safe, and I want you to go back to the amygdala, if the amygdala has gotten enlarged, if the person has been exposed to lots of humiliation and neglect and verbal abuse and maybe physical and psychological abuse and sexual abuse, if they've been exposed to that, then they really don't feel safe anywhere. They've lost the ability to predict. The brain has lost the ability to predict whether something's safe or not. So a simple example of this is somebody burns their hand on the stove And the brain will never let you forget that. It looks at every single stove after that and it predicts it might be harmful. And so you start to develop a lot of anxiety about stoves. You're like, I can't come into your house if there's a stove because I just, it makes me panic. It makes me, I'm afraid. I can't concentrate. I can't do anything. All I can think about is the ruminating thoughts in my brain that I'm at risk. That is an enlarged amygdala. That's hypervigilance. That's a brain that doesn't feel safe. And so again, though, we can recover and repair brains. We need to learn ways to make brains feel safe. And this is kind of thing Brain Balance does. It works with the mind, brain, body in order to teach a new way of being in the space by harnessing all these different capacities that we have to replace what might have been a very unsafe formative years growing up, maybe during war, maybe during poverty or famine or all of the different immigration, the terrible things that people have to go through. But it's mostly abuse and neglect that will create this feeling of lack of safety. Um, and we can repair that. We can fix it. So we want brains to be in homeostasis. We want them to feel safe. Everything we can do as an absolute, like, complete sort of basic foundation is create safety for the brain and really question, do you feel safe? How does that feel? What are the words you would use? How can you tell me when you don't feel safe? What makes you feel unsafe, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is the work of, professional psychologists and psychiatrists and all our mental health counselors, but they're overburdened. So we have to help them by learning this vocabulary and this approach and getting them to understand that, if the kid is bullying, really the question isn't, do you understand what terrible thing you've done? The question is, how come you feel unsafe? What's going on? Like, what is threatening you right now? What has happened that you feel that targeting someone else is going to make you feel better? I'm going to work with you so that we can get to the bottom of this and make you feel safe. So one of the people are very accustomed to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we put sort of social relational things sort of higher up on the triangle, and at the bottom we put food and shelter. From a brain point of view, a neuroscience point of view, connection is as important to the brain as food and shelter. You have to have food for the brain, you have to have shelter for the brain, and you have to have connection. A brain that does not have connection, community, co-regulation will not grow and develop healthily on a really horrendous level, not just higher level emotional connection and thinking and cognitive abilities, things like walking. It will not learn how to walk if it is not properly cared for from an emotional, empathic, kind, loving kind of connection. So how do we co-regulate? We can use things like, and it doesn't work as well through screens. Screens are okay, but just like you can't teach a language through a computer program, children learn languages, adults learn languages much more efficiently and effectively, and kids won't even learn at all if it isn't in person. They need a person. They need to be learning language from another speaker. And similarly with co-regulation, the top version of co-regulation is in person. We're mammals. We need to reach out and put our arm around someone's shoulders when they're upset. We need to hug them when they're grieving. We need to let them know by touching their hand that we're there for them. We are mammals and we need that. You can also use facial expression, very open, caring facial expression. There's lots of science on this about, we know what an angry face looks like. We know what a disgusted face looks like, or a threatening face. We can recognize that. And that's the opposite of what you want to do when you co-regulate. You want to be open. You want soft eyes. You want to look into their eyes. And you want to make sure that your tone of voice, which carries a huge amount of your meaning, is loving and open and curious and kind. You need a kind tone of voice in order for someone to open up and tell you they don't feel safe, and then work with you to establish that. That's co-regulation. Prosody is the way you use your voice. So if you use a very flat affect, a very flat monotone, it's threatening to the brain. The brain does not respond well to that. It doesn't respond well to yelling. That's very threatening to the brain. They've looked at MRIs and fMRIs of kids who are yelled at frequently by their family, and they show similar damage as to kids that are physically and sexually abused. That's how serious things that we've utterly normalized can be for the brain. So yelling is no good. Prosody is when you talk to a pet, or if you talk to you'll hear people do this really fast with babies. They use a kind of sing song. It's not flat affect. Nobody says to their dog, let's go for a walk. They say, oh, you want to go for a walk? Like that. That's prosody. Same thing with a baby. Who's the cutest little baby I've ever seen? That's prosody. That sing-song loving voice is music for the brain. And then affectionate touch, we already talked about. So compassion for self and others releases oxytocin. Again, there's tons of research on this, and there is a particularly fabulous book I was telling Amanda about that I've just read recently called How Love Wins, and it's written by two educator PhDs, the Carnines, their husband and wife, funnily enough, and they have written all about the research on kindness and health and well-being. And so I highly recommend this book, and I will send you the title and see if I can find the link for it. Because one of the things that this is pretty cutting edge from the research neuroscience point of view. They're now understanding that oxytocin, which is it's the opposite in a sense, if we're going to talk in a simple way, it's the opposite of cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone that can do terrible damage to brain and body. Oxytocin is a hormone that can do amazing healing things for brain and body. It makes us healthy. It makes us resilient. It can work positively against diseases like cancer. It's enormous. And they're only just realizing that it can come simply from kindness to one another. It's the hormone that's released when it's released during sexual activity like love. It's released during nursing of a baby, and it's released when the mom goes into labor. It's deeply correlated with those most deep acts of love in humanity. And they now know that it's not just the deepest, most intense forms of love, also kindness. Kindness is enough, and safety, the creation of safety, which creates a feeling of love and kindness in our environment, that can be what makes oxytocin, not cortisol, the hormone that is being released. So you guys at Brain Balance are experts in activating the parasympathetic system. It's the seesaw. It's on a seesaw with the sympathetic stress response. Both of them are completely good. Remember, we're not in an ethical, it's not good and bad. They're both healthy brain body responses to whatever it is that is threatening our survival. So we go into fight, flight, freeze because we think our life is under threat from a predator, and we're getting all ready to do what we need to do to save ourselves. That's fine, but in the 21st century, as we talked about, it gets tripped up too much. Everything makes it activated. So we have to be much more intentional and teach our kids and teach our young people and young adults and people at work. This should be utterly built into the daily practice of people at work. We need to have time for our parasympathetic system. It gets activated by co-regulation. It makes us calm down. We go into rest and digest. It gets activated, and I'm going to quickly go through some slides just as a memory device for you, because many of you will know this, but it's just good to hear the message again. I mean, how many, ask yourself just really quickly, have you already put some time in today, or do you have on your schedule a moment today where you're going to do things like mindfulness, or you're going to do aerobic exercise? You're going to really set aside time in your busy work day or parenting day to really decompress in an affectionate and loving and caring and curious way, a co-regulation way with the people in your world, whether it's colleagues or your family, your friends, whatever. Have you done that? Because if you haven't, that's probably the most healthiest, most important part of your day, and you just have to find the time for it. But what we do when we do that, like mindfulness, for example, when we do that slow breathing, really what you're doing is telling your brain, which can't see anything, you're telling it that there's no predators around. You're just on a lily pad, and you can do a lot of deep breathing and relaxing. You're out in the grasses of the Serengeti or up in a tree, and there's no threat. So it's time for the brain and body to do all the things it needs to do, rest and digest, to be healthy. So collaboration, which is like, a core component of kindness, is something that we should always be striving for. So when we teach sports, it's great. Sports are competitive, and there's lots of fun when you win, and that's really great. And you're trying to strive and do your best. But we also know that high performance sports, like the most elite athletes, they do far better if they are in flow. And flow is a state, we don't have to get into the complexities of it. It's a psychological state that comes from feeling so connected, so kind, so empathic, so completely in the world of your team that you just are in a different, like time stands still. That's flow state. And that does not come from feeling competitive and being laser focused on winning and your status and impressing people and not being yelled at by your coach or parents. It has none of those things. Flow is high performance, and high performance athletes do lots of things like mindfulness and empathic strengthening in order to get to that place. So it's something that all of us can do. It's a very healthy state to be in. And at its core is kindness, empathy, reciprocity, togetherness, bonding, co-regulation. These are the things that we should be striving for in the workplace and in sports and arts and school, everything that we do. I mean, even think our school system, even, we have a tendency to pit kids against each other. What's your mark? You know, what does your report card look like? What did you get on that test? What was your essay grade? It's like, no, we need to be teaching them flow. We need to teach them how to work in teams. They're much more likely to do that in the workplace. So why would we create this kind of, this self-judgment, negative self-talk, this kind of model that we know doesn't work, fixed mindset, as Carol Dweck would call it. So aerobic exercise, it's one of the best things you can do for your brain. So just in a quick form, it lowers your cortisol. So that stress hormone that's really destructive when it gets repeated unnecessarily. It lowers your cortisol and it pumps up what's called BDNF. And BDNF stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Don't need to remember that. Just remember BDNF, or remember that it's a fertilizer for the brain. It's not eroding brain architecture and leaving neurological scars like cortisol does. It is actually making your brain resilient. It's repairing it from stresses that you have, and it's making you be able to fight better against stresses. So aerobic exercise, mix it with collaboration, mix it with teamwork and company and co-regulation, even better. Mindfulness, as we've already said, it's one of the best things you can do for your brain. If you don't know how to do it, it's actually the simplest thing on the planet that's the hardest thing to do. I am not good at mindfulness. I practice it, but it's hard work for me. My brain is like zinging all around, riddled with anxiety, worrying about the past and anxious about the future. And I have to work really hard to slow my breathing for 20 minutes to get me into that state where I know I'm doing the repair work that I need and I'm being calmer going forward, etc. If you don't, there's all kinds of tricks of the trade. Guided meditation is really good, tons of resources on the internet. I do lots of walking meditation because I don't like to sit still. So I will really take the opportunity, if walking somewhere, if I have to go somewhere or I'm just going for a walk, I use that time to do mindfulness. Deep reading, and that's not reading, it's not reading Harlequin romance or thrillers or, page turning detective stories. That's not literature. Literature, you have to choose literature. It's hard work to read. Again, go online to find out what are the great literary works of the world and read through them, because go and find the books that win the prizes, the literary prizes, and read them. Because the more we do this deep reading, the more we work on our empathy. If you are worried at all that you have empathy erosion from your upbringing or from the tough workplace that you're in or the school system you went to or the sport program, that's okay. One of the best ways to get your empathy up and running, and in other words, build your kindness muscles, your compassion muscles, is to read great literature, because you're training yourself to walk in someone else's shoes, look at the world from their point of view. So high performance absolutely hinges on having a safe brain. It hinges on having a healthy brain, brains that are empathic, brains that are kind. Those are the high performing brains. If you are channeling your resources into threat detection, into anxiety, into inability to concentrate, these competitiveness, unkindness, bullying, if your brain is getting absorbed with all those things, you're not being creative, you're not problem solving, you're not being intellectual, you're not collaborating, you're not doing any of the miraculous things the brain can do to be in high performance mode, like in sports as well, or arts, or any of these things. So definitely you want to choose safety. You want to choose kindness. Why? They're not just healthy, they also are going to help you fulfill your potential. So here's our last slide. I just want you to remember, it's the most important thing. We all have neuroplasticity. So no matter how much you might despair one day and feel that your child has their brain is like this, or you learn from the teacher, or the coach has said your child will never be a great athlete, or you'll never get a promotion at work, any of all these kinds of things, just don't even hear it, because it's not true. The bottom line is, all of us can change our brains by what we practice until our last day on the planet. We all have neuroplasticity. It's some of the most important research of the last 20, 30 years. The father of neuroplasticity is Dr. Michael Merzenich. And I can just trust me when I say, it's sky's the limit. Literally, the sky is the limit when it comes to your brain. And so we'll stop there if people have questions, or I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There we go.
That was wonderful, Jennifer. I'm like typing. We have such an engaged chat going on here. And I already let everyone know to please start putting their questions there as well. So for those who joined us a little bit later from the beginning, again, this is being recorded. And I was thinking, Jennifer, should we keep recording through the Q&A? Because sometimes it's really rich and worth having. Okay. So
Well,
I'll
you
keep
have
recording.
yeah, your audience is deeply engaged and knowledgeable. I think that they will contribute a lot.
Awesome. Okay. So I will keep recording for those that are on right now. If you want to keep your privacy, please make sure that you keep your camera off and your mic off as well. And you can just put it into the chat box and I'll just read it out for everyone. You can also message me privately. In the chat box if you don't want to put it out to everyone else, if you have those types of questions as well, okay? And so we do have one question right now. It says, do you have any recommendations on literature to read to increase empathy? And I think you do. So
You know, one of the empathy is so fascinating. I'm going to tell you two facts about it, neuroscience facts that will give you an idea, and then we'll go to the literature. One of the things that they know about the brain now is that our empathy is what they call tribal. And it makes sense. Think about it from a survivor point of view. You're on your island, someone comes from another tribe, a neighboring tribe, and they might well kill you, right? Limited resources. That's, humanity used to be pretty tough in terms of survival. So our brain has been wired through evolution to recognize difference and to automatically, we're not consciously doing it, we automatically create bias. So when they say empathy is tribal, you can imagine that I feel more empathy. It's shameful. I don't like to admit it, but it's automatic in my brain. I feel more empathy for someone like me. I'll have more empathy for a white woman, a woman that has the same education and culture as me. And it's all happening without me making a decision. So what we want to do is read literature that reminds us that there are so many diverse others out in the world having these incredible experiences who are actually more similar to us than what our brain might think on first look. I know lots of women who look like me that I have nothing in common with, absolutely nothing. I know lots of people from other cultures and races and religions that I am instantly bonded with. I share a deep, deep value system, a deep education, a deep curiosity and care for them. And they don't look anything like me. And that doesn't, in the 21st century, we're in a different world. So we always are kind of working to identify things that our brains do really automatically that don't serve us anymore. That's outdated tribal empathy. Another thing, so I would read books about people that aren't like you. Try and read books, go and find the Japanese author that just won the Pulitzer Prize for his book. Those types of people, really stretch yourself. Be in whole other different worlds of emotion and culture and so on, because it's so rich and so enriching for your empathy to walk in their shoes, see the world through their lens, etc. Another key thing about empathy, which is a whole other conversation, but it's really important to know, empathy and power are in an inverse relationship. In other words, the more power a person accrues in their life, the more they have power, the less empathy they feel. And this is why, we all walk around going, how can that world leader do this heinous thing that he, or it's mostly he, but he or she is doing? How can they sleep at night? How can they stand it? It's just, we can't even wrap our imagination around the magnitude of the cruelty. Well, the bottom line is they have so much power. Their empathy is not making them feel awake at night or panicky or whatever. So what we should be doing is everybody who is in a position of power should have a whole council of highly empathic people that help them make the right decision. But we don't have that in our world right now. So again, what should you read? Read all the books that really you kind of feel intimidated by and afraid of and aren't sure and just don't think you have anything in common and surprise yourself with how much, there is incredible diversity out there that will just really build up that muscle for you.
Great. We have quite a few questions. Another one is, what strategies would you recommend for helping a child unwind and heal from the effects of stress or the bullied brain after returning home from school or a big social event?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, here's another really thing that I find fascinating about the brain, and all parents know this, and teachers and coaches can get to that place too. Every single brain is unique, so you can never answer that question. Only you, as mom or dad, the person that is always with that kid and has the ability to ask the child, can make that proper best fit decision because every brain is unique. So when a neurosurgeon is going to do surgery on the brain, they have to map it first. They have to spend 8 hours figuring out the uniqueness of the brain. It's as unique as fingerprints. So basically, the best thing you could do with your kid is give them opportunities to try stuff. Do they want to get out in nature? Does that help them? No, doesn't turn out to be great. Do they want to listen to music? You might have a kid that is highly musical. Maybe they want to sing. Maybe they just want to be quiet and like hang out, and maybe they want to read, maybe graphic novels, maybe I mean there's so many different things you could do with them, but really what your goal is to find it. Is it, do they want to run around with their friends and play a sport? Do they want to do yoga, martial arts? I mean, we luckily live in a world of so many opportunities. It's a matter of figuring out with them, like co-creating a plan for, okay, what do we want to do? I'm there to be with you if you can. I mean, parents are so busy these days, but yeah, I think that only you can answer that with your kid.
Do you mind if I add along to that?
Of course.
So at Brain Balance, we get asked pretty similar things as well. And I would absolutely agree that it depends on each child. And so to piggyback on the previous points in your presentation, it's some of that self-love and that's kindness that you give towards yourself. So what is it that makes you happy? And how do we reinforce your self-worth, right? Instead of letting someone else break you down. But then you mentioned the co-regulation too. We know a lot in trauma-informed care. It's that stable adult and ideally community, the village, not just one, that helps overcome that trauma. And so not only helping the child or the individual develop the tools and the awareness for that self-love and being kind to themselves and healing their own brain, but also being able to rely on that parent or that community to build them back up as well, whatever the activity may be, and just that those affirmations, I guess, right? I think is so important.
I just want to add to what Amanda said because it made me think of something that I have it in the book, The Bully Brain, but I'd kind of forgotten about it. But it's a great strategy. You can record. It's amazing. For example, the mother's voice in particular for children can, if you record yourself speaking and they listen on headphones and it's a repeated kind of loving messaging,
Yes.
maybe you change it once a week. Yeah, that kind of stuff can be remarkably healing for stress and it's quite fascinating. Yeah. And
Totally.
I love that Amanda said I should have said it and it didn't even cross my mind, but the absolute core of all of this too is self-kindness. You have to, if you're not kind to yourself, and I can assure you those individuals that are out there bullying, they are not kind to themselves. They can't find that feeling. They don't even know it. It's pretty sad. So they can't offer it to others. But again, the more we build up our own kindness to our own brain, our own mind and body, the more we offer it out to the world.
And actually, let me ask a side question to what you just said. What's your advice for bringing that awareness to these folks being unkind? And they have no idea they're being unkind, right? That's where the microaggressions come in, for instance. Or maybe it's not so micro and they're just so that lack of awareness, which at Brain Balance we talk a lot about because awareness, self-awareness is based on brain connections too. And there's that interoception and so much more. But what is your advice for bringing awareness to these folks performing these unkind acts?
Yeah, there's two different types of people that manifest these very unkind or bullying behaviors. You have the threatened person, and they will manifest abrasive behaviors. They're the yeller and screamer and put downs and humiliation and rant and rave, and they'll do it to anybody. That is an abrasive brain, and they're very responsive to coaching. They are mortified when they find out that they're hurting people. They are open to getting better. They work hard at it. They understand that their brain is acting in a defensive way. It's in fight mode, and the fight mode is because they feel like they're going to be judged. Their product isn't going to be good. The presentation to the higher ups won't be polished, and they're so panicked that they lash out. That person can be helped a lot, and is very responsive to coaching. On the flip side, if you've got somebody who's been exposed to a lot of abuse and neglect, and they are very, very unwell indeed, they have empathy erosion, they have a dysregulated brain, they are so harmful and so in denial that it's you only an extremely advanced professional could ever make a difference with them. And all the different things that we might do is not going as people is not going to help them. And I mean, just to give you an idea of the magnitude of this, they will be set across from a psychiatric professional and the dark triad, narcissist, Machiavellian, psychopath. Within about 20 minutes to half an hour, they will have the psychiatric expert doubting their own sense of reality. That's how manipulative they are. And so I think that we have to admit to ourselves we can't fix those people. They need professional help, and they need to be away. They cannot be, it's like they've got an illness and they need to be in quarantine. They don't need to be punished, but they need to get better, and we can't do it. One final strategy, we are highly visual creatures. So, if you think about, it was wired into us that smoking was the greatest thing in the world. It made you independent and powerful and attuned with nature. It made you healthy, and it made you sophisticated. So everybody smoked, including doctors. All of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, by the way, it kills you, gives you cancer. And we're like, what? We don't know how to change. Like, how are we supposed to go from being smokers to non-smokers? How are you gonna help us? Well, look at what they did. A massive campaign of giving us the visuals. Every single time you got to buy cigarettes, you have to look at someone's cancerous lungs. That makes your brain hesitate. Your brain goes, whoa, I don't want that. And they're making it visual for me. So I think we should have a huge campaign where we make it visual to people. That even when you do microaggressions, you think it's funny, you think it's normal to laugh at somebody or put them down or whatever, or sexually harass someone and call it flirting, whatever. Oh yeah, you got to see what it looks like on a brain scan or a visual of it, because it hurts the brain. You don't really want to hurt someone's brain, do you? And it's certainly not a kid's brain. I think that would make a difference.
Okay, couple more questions. Have you found effective ways to reach different generations and change the thinking that kindness is soft or feminine or frilly, and help them understand the brain sense that how kindness is actually a strength and good for your health? Similar to what I think, just said.
Well, yeah, you know what? A really great analogy for that is smoking. It was hammered into us, wired into our brains. Smoking makes you tough. And unfortunately, though, we learned that smoking makes you weak. It actually makes you sick. It might even kill you. And those are exactly the same phrases you can use for unkindness. We know that lack of kindness for the brain is, hey, here's the research. It's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. For someone to be isolated from the community, disconnected, not able to have co-regulation, 15 cigarettes a day. So, I mean, people can keep believing what they want, but the bottom line is, I do a lot of presentations in front of sport people who they do not want to hear my message at all, because I talk about safe sport. And they see me as the safe sport lady, and they automatically say she is going to stop us from being tough and competitive and winning the championship. And so they don't like it. And I always lead out with brain training. And I talk about Dr. Michael Merzenich brain training and how it's used by elite athletes like quarterback Tom Brady. And then I do a whole thing about, do you think Tom Brady is tough enough? And they're kind of like, well, he certainly is. And he is. And then we talk about how he's outperformed 20-something brains. At his 40s, he can outperform a 20-something brain. Why is that? Because he does brain training every day. He's not only the toughest guy out there, he's got the most advanced brain. And so that winning combination, the people that are sort of doubtful, or they've been wired to believe that it's a weakness and it's going to show weakness, you can get them to understand, well, then why are the toughest people out there using it? Another group that uses Dr. Michael Merzenich brain training. When I'll send this as a resource when Amanda and I connect, for anybody that wants to look at it. It's online, and it's designed by an international team of brain scientists. It's incredibly good for kids' brains. It's incredibly good for all of our brains. And this is why the armed forces in the US issues it to all of their people, active, in reserve, and veterans. And so what it does is it helps you in the field be sharper and faster and smarter and more empathic, and all the things you need to survive in the kinds of war-torn zones these people have to go to do their work. It also helps you recover from PTSD when you come home. And it's like brain gym, brain fitness, exercise for the brain. We live in a society that tells us our brains don't exist. We don't teach it at school. We don't teach it in the workplace. We don't teach it in sports even. We say sports is a mental game, but how many athletes know a single thing, let alone their coaches, about their brains? Nothing. So we need to change that. And like you said, Amanda, this is a village opportunity for
Absolutely.
all the people on,
Yeah.
you all care about brains. Brain Balance is, who is leading the charge.
Yep. Yep. Definitely been leading the charge for a long time. Okay, so we'll wrap it up. Last question is, do you mind sharing your vision for the future of this impactful work and how we can help further the awareness of this groundbreaking effort and research?
Well, I mean, I'm an educator, so I'm wired to believe that education is the way to do everything. I don't know if it is, but I believe it because it's how I operate. So I just finished. I mean, I sound like I'm promoting my own work, but I really actually care about this as much as the person asking the question. So I have my book, and it's a book about neuroscience. People have said, oh, it's a page turner on neuroscience, but I've just designed an activity guide because, as we all know, that matches with the book. So it's called A Field Guide to the Bullied Brain. As we all know, you don't change by just reading something. You have to put in the practice. So I think the best answer to that is, what are the practices that we're doing, and how are we sharing practices with other people? Because it's that whole, ripple becomes a wave kind of thing. The more every single one of us brings in one or two or three people, and then they go disseminate it to their three people, we are going to start to see these changes. I mean, we all have our different ways of making the brain become essential in our lives and in our children's lives. So, yeah.
Thank you. I agree. The ripple effect is key, right? That's why we do these types of collaborations and talks, and that's why we record this to be able to share with those who weren't able to make it with us. To those who are with us today, we have Elizabeth Cox, who launched the Kindness Club here in San Diego, to Kevin and his kindnessworldwide.org. So everyone, please be that village, share. And we just thank you so much for being a part of this amazing talk today, Jennifer. And I'm so looking forward to collaborating with everybody to continue this movement of kindness over, the bullied brain. Just think about kindness. How can kindness help combat that, right?
Yeah, now that I know that Kevin Smith is here on the call, I don't think any of us need to worry anymore. He's a one-man show. He's going to change the world by himself. He creates these just, oh, there he is. Now, everybody, if you want a real answer to how do we change kindness, there's your guy right there.
Kevin's the one that connected me to Jennifer, and Elizabeth's the one that connected me to Kevin. So it's this nice ripple effect for sure.
And Elizabeth is here too, so it's like perfect, perfect. Yeah.
Awesome.